Good interruption because so anyway, oh my God, where was I? Oh yeah, so we acquired this space and we turned it into a community center. We thought it was going to be kind of like a bonus to housing, but actually it exploded. We realized that there are so many different groups and residents and associations that are organizing to better the conditions of their communities, but they are incredibly under-resourced. And so we realized that they need space, but they also need support, organizational support. They need help making connections with other groups and people that have strengths so that they can focus on what they're good at and have their weaknesses be sort of like offset by the strength of other groups. So really building connections that way. The problem with our community center first is that it's too small and it's over solicited. So we'll be getting into that later in terms of solutions. Um, but basically it's been a success. So long story short, we started with a community bond raise, which unexpectedly was the largest in Quebec at the time and the second largest in Canada. And it was a modest sum in today's terms of $350,000. And with that $350,000, because of the social capital that we gained and the actual, the equity that we were able to leverage, we now are an organization with workers, and we have $20 million worth of assets if we include the housing project and the community center. So the housing project is fully financed. It's being constructed. The community center is booming. It's like it's really dynamic. So last year we were basically like, what do we do now? Our model is working. So why don't we try to do the same thing at a larger scale? Why don't we try to build more housing for people in need and benefit from the economies of scale that we can activate? And why don't we also get a bigger community center so that our space users can use our space, can have their activities at the same time, so that there can be an organic building of relationships between communities that are working to improve the lives of asylum seekers, LGBTQ, Muslims, youth that are in the club scene that feel excluded, organizations that need space and are under-resourced. So all kinds of different groups. We want to have them be able to use the space at the same time and to facilitate relationships so that we can really contribute to building that movement that I was talking about. And speaking of movement, I would really like to invite Jessica from JIA to talk a little bit about what they've been up to in Chinatown. What I really, really want to convey by inviting Jessica here, the first time I met Jessica, she told me the story of JIA, and I was completely blown away. What they've achieved and where they're going is really cool. And we're slowly moving in the same direction in the sense that we're, I think, looking to develop, do community organizing, but also do economic development. The sort of overarching story I really want to convey is that there's something magical happening in Montreal. People are organizing to take back their neighborhoods in their own way. And in that way, they're rewriting or writing their own destiny. So please, Jessica, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's happening in your neck of the woods?
Thanks, Faith. I am so glad to be here with you all. And I have been a fan of Brick by Brick's work for a long time. Um, and just listening to what you're describing of these two projects, they're just very inspiring for us because we are quite early when it comes to community real estate development in terms of our process. And Brick by Brick's work has been great inspiration for JAP Foundation. for their very holistic and people-centered approach to community building, and at the same time having these concrete projects and tools allowing community to have control and agency for the development of the neighborhood. So thanks for having me, and to contribute to today's discussion, I will just briefly talk about the backstory of JIA Foundation, how we came together and where we are going now, and what we hope to do. And a lot of what we hope to do, we are actually similar to what Brique is working on. We hope to learn from that. So I want to talk a bit about JIA Foundation's early backstory. Is actually started from these community actions that started around 2018 when Faith, you are working on your first project. And I actually remember talking with you back then. That's even before I got involved with Chinatown. So in 2018, in Chinatown, we actually had a perfect storm brewing in Chinatown. So at the time, we were witnessing a big loss of accessible and affordable community spaces. The YMCA closed down their center in Chinatown. That is the only recreational facility local residents has in Chinatown. And the building that used to house former community center was at the brink of being sold. Then 2019, with the global pandemic, that is hard for all neighborhoods in Montreal, but with the pandemic, there was also increase of anti-Asian hate. So a lot of businesses were closing down, and the long-term property owners started to lose hope, and they started to sell properties and move out. With those conditions, real estate speculation started to intensify in and around Chinatown. Lands were changing hands and trading with the expectation of rezoning approval will be granted for high-rise development. So in fact, we saw two hotel and condo development popping up at the southern edge of the Chinatown Gate without any consultation. And in fact, on their marketing material, the Chinatown Gate was already erased on their marketing material. So it's fair to say that Chinatown was going through a very active erasure at the time. So of course, the Chinatown community didn't just sit back and we fought back. Communities started to organize. And that was the time I started getting involved with Montreal's Chinatown. Myself came from Vancouver 12 years ago. So that was around 2018. It was the time I met Mei Chu and a few other long-term community organizers, started getting involved with Chinatown. So what communities started to mobilize, a few critical milestones I want to share the story with you all. One is about that building that was at the brink of being lost. Chinese Family Services of Greater Montreal purchased and moved its office into that building that used to house the community center. Right now, while still very challenging for the building, but it really the move did buy the community some time to save these very particular important community assets. And about the development that were happening without community consultation, community came together, asked for a moratorium to the city to put a stop on all development in Chinatown. And obviously we didn't get it. It's very difficult to get a moratorium for development in the city, but the city did grant a community consultation for us. And so we went forward with that. But while we were in the middle of a good faith consultation process with the city, attending all these different workshops and discussion, the real estate speculation did not stop. And in fact, the big developer started to assemble the most oldest block of Chinatown, with most of the building being assembled, and they already put together a holding company's name, 1000 Saint-Hubert. So the building was ready, slated for a high-rise development. So the one of the remaining tenant was getting moved out from that block, and one of the remaining tenant, his name is Jean-Philippe Riopel. He sounded alarm. He took to the social media, and the thing just blew up. So our community was mobilizing for a year already, but with that alarm, we started to take mobilization to a different scale. And in fact, a lot of allied communities were chipping in as well. Milton Park and everybody, Plateau, people who share the same concern, and including Brique as well. I talked with Faith at that time. Everybody started saying, hey, how do we kind of stop this? So community group came together, and we formed, including the group I'm part of. It's called the Chinatown Working Group. We focus our advocacy on the call of heritage designation with this intensified real estate speculation going on. And the reason for the heritage designation as our main advocacy tool was twofold. Other than the fact that Chinatown was located in the oldest part of Faubourg Saint-Laurent. Other than the obvious fact that Chinatown is a historically significant place, but we have two other particular reasons. One, by recognizing Chinatown heritage, we want to state that a vision for future Chinatown need to be rooted in its history and culture. So by extension, that we are basically asking for a type of plan that is have a right to city, right to neighborhood movement built into it. And the second thing with the heritage designation was the land use and zoning regulation that need to be brought in once you have the heritage designation. And so that's kind of what we did. So after a very intensive couple of years of community action, we succeeded in 2022. We got the heritage designation, and followed by an OCPM citywide consultation process. The whole Chinatown was downzoned, and with the expanded boundary of Chinatown. And in addition, other than the heritage designation, I want to also mention the other tool that was important for us, other than getting the new zoning, which is, we always like to quote that, it took Mount Royal, the cross on the Mount Royal, 10 years to get their designation, and we did it in 2. So we'd like to brag about that. But the other than important thing about the heritage designation and land use zoning change is just a regulatory framework change. The other important piece is the fact that earlier we talked about community consultation process that we asked the city to do. What we got out of that was a 5-year action plan for Chinatown. And the importance of that was the fact that out of it, becomes the creation of the Chinatown Roundtable, which become the main conduit, continuous conduit with the city, so we can keep the communication with the city open, and to advocate for civic investment into this neighborhood that's been long neglected and lack of needed civic community infrastructure, like community center. Right now, even when we want to have a meeting, we don't really have a meeting space. So that's really a big problem. Phase, you talk about lack of a community space, and right now we just move into our space. We are experiencing that the need is immense, and so how do we kind of tackle that need? So that was the community action that I want to share, that bit of a story. Hopefully, it will contribute to today's discussion. Those community action was captured by Karen Cho's film, appropriately named "A Big Fight in Little Chinatown." So after this big fight, we basically dissolved the Chinatown Working Group that was a grassroots collective, and we set up 2 nonprofit organizations. One is earlier I mentioned, the Chinatown Roundtable, and that was supported by the city, and then continued to really be liaising with the city on the implementation of 5-year action plan. And the other organization set up was the JIA Foundation, and that I'm part of. It was formed in 2022, and the reason we do that is we want to switch gear swiftly after we are successful with the advocacy. Other than just fighting against things that we don't want, now we got the regulatory framework in place. We want to switch gear to start to do the work that Brique by Brique is doing. We want to start to think about what type of development we want. How do we access the financing, potential social impact financing options, and how do we go about with access to decision-making, inclusive decision-making, in order to make all these projects moving forward. So that's kind of where we are now. With JIA Foundation, our mandate is to protect and promote Chinatown's cultural heritage through education, space activation, and community-driven real estate solutions. So our approach generally is to start with programming. And by programming, we go in to activate underutilized community spaces to stop the bleeding, so community will be able to hold on and then retain the important community assets instead of facing these real estate gentrification pressure to need to sell out. So that's what we have been doing the first couple of years, because obviously it's a lower threshold, doesn't require a lot of capitals to be able to do. And we have been successful in the first couple of years with those type of work to activate underutilized community spaces. And now we are moving into the realm of community real estate tools, and a couple of projects that we're working on. One is the launch of the Clark Street Reimagined. So city used droit de préemption and assembled the assembly of 3 lots on Clark Street to build a mixed-use housing project. So JIA Foundation, in partnership with Chinatown Roundtable, Comité Logement, and Table de Concertation Faubourg Saint-Laurent, we came together and put together a steering committee to work with the city about set up a vision for that project that city already assembled a lot to build. So that is one of our key projects moving forward that we are working on. And the other project is, I earlier mentioned, we moved into our first physical space. And I just want to end on that, our new chapter of the Big Fight in Little Chinatown story. Remember I mentioned the tenants who sounded alarm about developer assembling the lots in the oldest part of Chinatown, Jean-Philippe. Last year, he managed to assemble enough money to buy the building from the developer. So now the building is back in Jean-Philippe's hands. And after he bought the building, obviously it's massive mortgage. He's saying like, oh, he called us saying, hey, Jessica, can you guys figure out whether JIA Foundation can move into the ground floor? Because I really would prefer not to have another taco shop opening up in Chinatown. Nothing wrong with taco shop, but this very important building, we really would like to have a tenant like yours, like you. And so we were lucky, and in December we were able to secure enough funding and to move into our first location. So in a way, it is quite a kind of a full circle story for that building now back in the community's hands, with JIA now having signed a 2-year lease to be able to start to do our continue community organizing and our culture programs in that space. And with some stability of our own space to do organizing instead of just popping up different places, we are now start to think want to start to think about the subject that we are talking about here today in a more systemic and forward-looking way. So we will be wanting to assemble different toolkit that we can learn from, and then go into our next chapter for JIA. And for those who don't know why JIA Foundation, what is JIA? So JIA is a Mandarin word, means family and home. And we chose this word to be our organization's name, to just show that our vision for Chinatown is more than a tourist destination. And that is kind of the challenge at times that Chinatown really need to face, because that's a common narrative for a lot of policymakers about the way they plan Chinatown. It is a tourist destination, but it is also a living community. So that's kind of our name, JIA Foundation, just show that's the vision for us moving forward. So I'm going to end here and look forward to learning more about the community bond as a tool, and then in the end, maybe getting to the conversation on how we will be able to build this movement together in both north and south of Montreal City. Over to you,
Amazing.
Nicholas.
Yeah, thank you so much for that wonderful story, Jessica. Yeah, I've had the privilege of working with some of the wonderful local activists, if not by choice, by necessity in the neighborhood. And I'm so glad that it's looking up. And with Resource Movement and other groups, we're hoping to make sure that it stays on that, let's say, community building path. So for now, I'd like to turn it over to Amber to talk about building the movement with Brique by Brique.
Thank you, Nicola. So I'm Amber. I work on community engagement and partnerships at Brique by Brique. And I also have a background in architecture. And so that's what kind of really inspired me to be engaged in this work and what drives my work. And so I'm really excited to see such a great turnout tonight with so many people interested in the Community Bond campaign. And so I have a quick presentation. I don't want to take too much time with it, just about some of our current work and our upcoming project. So I'll just share my screen. Okay. Can we all see my screen? Okay, nice. Oh, okay, we're good. So as Faiz kind of touched on a little bit, our main mandates are for creating affordable and accessible community housing and cultural spaces. And so these are the buildings that we own. We have our community center in Park X, which we acquired in 2021, and where we host many different projects and also different organizations. And we also have our new housing project, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And so these are all the things that happen in our current space in the duplex that we own in Park X. And so we have an event space on the ground floor, and we have community organizations that are hosted on the second floor with their offices. And so this is the kind of residents and space users. Our residents are long-term, but we have space users that come in and that use our space sometimes every week, every 2 weeks, or monthly. We also have collaborative programming. So these are projects that we collaborate with different organizations regularly. So there's often some Park X groups, but there's also groups all across Montreal. Recently, we've had monthly immigration workshops that are free. We've had Bollywood dance classes, game nights, community healing days. So many different types of workshops and events at the space. And we also have in-house initiatives. So these are projects that we work on as a team. So I'll dive a little deeper into some of these projects. So Park Exchange is a mutual aid initiative. It's kind of like a time bank. So we have volunteers that teach and support each other. The Monsoon Festival is a big annual cultural celebration that we have every summer with performances and vendors in Park X. And Food Stories is something that we started quite recently. It's a community dinner that gives some economic opportunities to local South Asian chefs. So that's every month in our space. And Connections is a support group for immigrant women that we started quite a while back. It's I think our longest program so far. And so I'll talk a little bit about our housing project. So we are currently converting a former paint factory into 31 social housing units. And so this is a photo of the existing building with some team members. The building is actually quite contaminated, and so we just went through demolition this week, or like the demolition process is starting, and the construction will start in a few months. And so we're working with an architecture firm, Rayside Lavoisière, who came up with the final designs. And so hopefully, if everything goes well, the project will be completed in summer 2026. And so we've been working on the application process as well for the resident selection, which is set to open this summer. And so all of this work with our existing buildings and our existing projects were really made possible, partially thanks to our 2018 community bond investors. So this funding helped us to acquire our current community center and also helped us with the process of our housing project. And as Faiz said as well, this has made us Quebec's largest and Canada's second largest community bond provider. So pretty exciting. And so drawing from these previous experiences that we've had in acquiring and developing our projects and also hosting many different groups and organizations, we're working on a new community center, a center for creative and collective action. And so this comes out of a need for more space. Our current center is quite small. If some of you have been to our center, it's like a small living room. But we are able to do so much with this space. We host many different types of events and projects, and I know a lot of people really appreciate that we have this space in Park X that's free and that we can always host people's activities. But a drawback is that we can only have one activity at a time, and the space is quite in demand. So we want to be able to support our community and support new ideas and growth. I think not only the growth of our own organization, but also to support other organizations that are maybe a bit smaller or maybe more volunteer-led or grassroots organizations that are looking to grow. And so the idea is to have a larger, more multifunctional space where we can host many different facilities and services and also more organizations at the same time. We also noticed that sharing space is more than just about the space. In our current center, we collaborate quite a bit with our current residents and our space users on so many different things. So for example, like programming, we always collaborate on programming. We support each other and grant applications. We make recommendations for hiring. We promote each other's work. And so the goal with this is really to create a network where organizations can come together and support each other. So our process has been quite collaborative. We reached out initially to many different organizations that we currently work with or that inspire us or that we want to work with on this new community center. And so we asked them what their needs are or the challenges in their organization or what are their goals. And so this kind of helped us frame what we wanted to do in this new space. And so we've been inviting them along in the process to consultations on site visits to help us imagine what kind of space can empower all of our communities together. And so this is kind of a breakdown of the spaces that we've imagined. We don't have a building yet. We're still looking at different sites, but this is kind of a rough vision of what we're looking for. So some of these spaces, for example, we have the commons, which is kind of like a community living room. So like a welcoming entrance space that's connected to all of the other spaces where people are welcome to come and sit down for coffee or wait for their event to start. Then we have an arena. So this is our event and gathering space where we can have a few different activities at the same time. We have an outdoor space to come together and celebrate outdoors. We have a resource center. So this is kind of, we're thinking maybe like a media lab or a production area where we can share different equipment, maybe use a computer or camera or different resources. And we also have a forum. So this comes out of the need for a civic space, maybe an auditorium where we can have talks or presentations. And then the Exchange Hub, which is a workspace to house different organizations. So with offices, with meeting areas, with co-working spaces. So this is kind of what we were thinking so far, but it's rough, but this kind of helps us to envision what the space we're looking for will host. And so this is some of our vision, I guess, a closer look at some of these spaces. So the resource center or media lab, then we have a community kitchen or cafe. We work often with a group, Park X Create Collective. And so they are a community kitchen. And so this will also lead into the open market where we can have food stalls and give economic opportunities to local residents. We have the auditorium or gathering space, the event spaces, and some co-working spaces and meeting rooms and offices. And this is some of our kind of inspiration for some of the models that we were inspired by for this new center. So really the kind of flexible, multifunctional layout where they can host many different activities at the same time. And there are spaces to eat together and create and play and gather. So this is kind of the open atmosphere that we're looking for. And so right now we are in the development and partnerships phase of our project. So we're still prospecting for buildings. We've been looking in Park X and in nearby neighborhoods. We've also been consulting with our community members, so inviting them along in the process and kind of helping us envision this new center. And we've been developing a financial campaign. So this is something that we've been working on for about the past 6 months or so. It's our new community bonds campaign. So this campaign will help support our work in continuing to create affordable and inclusive community spaces. And I think as Faiz and Jessica kind of touched on a bit, it's part of a larger movement across Montreal or maybe even Canada in securing accessible and this community-driven infrastructure. So the way we're doing this is through community bonds. Community bonds are a financial tool that lets individuals or organizations invest in community, or in our case, in nonprofits. So they're kind of similar to a traditional bond or a loan. There is a buy-in value, a fixed term, and also an interest rate of return. And so the process is a community member will buy a bond. It'll be backed by an asset. So in our case, it will help fund our social housing project and our new community center. And then investors are repaid over time. So this will depend on the bond terms. And so this is our strategy. So when investors buy a bond or several bonds, they will go into a community trust, and then this will help fund our new projects. And so I think I'll pass it over to Faiz now. Maybe if you want to talk a little bit more about the financial aspects and the community bonds.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amber. Maybe you could also help me stay on track by pushing me along with the slides. Well, first of all, before I even continue on that track, since this is our first info session, I want to like kind of like break the fourth wall here and be like, damn, thank you so much. You know, when we're working on the projects, we get so lost in the details. And now that I'm seeing our own presentation, I'm blown away by what we're doing. Woo! Yes, so the community bond. As Amber mentioned, it's actually the only way for a nonprofit to raise capital. Because nonprofits are not owned, they cannot issue shares. So the only thing they can do is to issue these community bonds. So to get specific about the bonds that we're issuing today, well, today, and they'll be ready in the next month or so, but you can already start pledging. We're already ready to receive those. I want to talk about the optionality, but I want to make sure that I'm not forgetting anything. Yeah, okay, before I talk about the options, basically we're very, very conservative when it comes to our finances. So we try not to be over leveraged. Our community center, for example, has a very small, relatively small mortgage as compared to like what a private real estate investor would set up. So we're looking at 50%. Generally speaking, like a half, the bank is half, and then the community bonds are the other half. This allows us actually to have a much lower debt load because the community bonds they pay out a coupon, like an interest annual, and then the principal is paid at the end. So you don't have to pay interest on a 25 or 30-year amortization. So it ends up being a lot cheaper for us, but the payout is the same for the investor. It's a comparable percentage. Right now we have bonds at we have 3-year bonds at 3%, 5-year bonds at 4%, and 7-year bonds at 5%, which compared to other bond offerings in Canada is very strong. And it's something that is comparable, I guess, and in terms of like the kind of financial products you might see on the private market for real estate backed like investment products. I obviously am, I can't tell you that it's like, better as an investment, but I think that it's better because it's backed by a community that believes in a project. I can say that because we've already issued the bonds, we kind of know what to expect, and what we see is, well, right now we're definitely on target, on track for our repayments for that first bond campaign. And we also see that investors really enjoy the returns, but they also enjoy the impact. They enjoy being a part of the journey. So a lot of them decide to renew, which ends up making the cost of our money a lot cheaper because the cost of our money reflects the original term, but the terms end up being on average longer. We also have investors that donate their interest payment and sometimes even their principal. And because of that and for other reasons, we now have a charitable number, so investors can benefit from the tax advantages of donating to us, because now we have a charitable status. Yeah, we're working with Tapestry. When we started, we kind of did it on our own because the community bonds were not a big thing in Canada, but now they are, largely thanks to Tapestry. Tapestry specializes in structuring the bonds, so creating the contracts, carrying out the due diligence on the issuer, making sure that their finances are stable. So they kind of like, in a way, they help organizations issue bonds because organizations specialize in, their specific communities or their specific sort of like projects, be it community organizing or building housing or whatever. So they bring in that financial expertise, but they also make sure that that organizations are, responsible towards their investors, and they help organizations carry out the appropriate due diligence. So it's been very helpful to work with them. If anybody is here because they're curious about issuing bonds for their organization, I strongly recommend that they work with Tapestry. Tapestry also, by the way, has a great relationship with the CMHC. So the services that they offer are really, really, really valuable, and they're not very expensive for the nonprofit, because the CMHC and the federal government have a big interest in seeing new models of financing come to life in Canada, so that we can have more housing and community purpose real estate. This time around, we not only wanted to work with Tapestry so that all our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed, and that also so that we could reach a larger pool of potential investors, but we also wanted to work with experts in the various fields of community economic development. Because yes, we're issuing bonds. Yes, but we're also we're also developing more housing projects and real estate for a community center that's on a much larger scale. And so we want to make sure that we have the capacity to do that internally. We have a lot of expertise in-house when it comes to community organizing, when it comes to partnership development, when it comes to relationships with funders, when it comes to relationship with the city. And we have developed a lot of real estate expertise over the years. But now that we're scaling up, we want to make sure that we learn from people who have done larger projects. So we have people like Philemon on our board that has experience doing big projects. We have someone like JIA on our board that's really, really strong in communication and building relationships and really understanding stakeholders. It's been such a joy working with JIA. John is there, of course. I will always want to be working with John forever, because they were there with us since day one. And the advice they gave us at the very beginning really was so crucial in helping us succeed and build something special. Zach is someone that I only met recently, but he helped the Kensington Market Community Land Trust succeed in raising a phenomenal, a community bond campaign. And the work that they're doing in Toronto is really fun. And I'm actually going there this week, so I'm hoping to meet him in person. Marie-France is someone that I met through brokerage, and she has a wild vision of bringing people who are doing similar projects all over Canada and United States. So she's building partnerships with groups in Montreal doing this kind of work, and she's connecting them with groups in New York and Atlanta, because you know how I talk about building a movement in Montreal. She's really on the level of building a movement in the world. So talking to her is always very inspiring. We've heard from Jessica, champion. We have so much to learn from them still. And Melissa has been with us for a long time, and her project is going to be one of our sort of like anchor tenants in the new community center. She's working on a wild, urban agriculture project. Yeah, I won't get into it because it's really exciting and funky. And Susanna, of course, Suzanne is of course. Whoop, there's a typo there. It's Suzanne. Um, is someone from Tapestry that just, I don't know what to say. Gold. So yeah, that's our advisory board. I wanted to belabor that because they're all beautiful people, and I'm so glad that they're with us. Yeah, so project timelines in real estate are definitely aspirational, but we have been very agile and have been able to bring projects to fruition quickly. So right now we're really in the prospecting phase for our community center. Obviously, we're running this community bond campaign at the same time, which is crazy. The prospecting is going well. We're building relationships with owners, which is tough because the reputation that people in real estate have as being sharks is accurate. But it's also true that they're human beings, and they do all have a soft spot. And if I believe that if there's any organization that can soften up a hardened business person, it is Brick by Brick. So and we see that happening. It doesn't mean that they're going to give us any extra dollars, but it does mean that we can get owners to give us better conditions, more time, more flexibility, less constraining due diligence requirements. So that's really great. In fact, we met with the owner of a site that we're looking at last week, and he really wanted to help us raise money. He wouldn't budge on the price, but he wanted to help us raise money. So that's really great. So yeah, so we're doing that. We're hoping to land the right buildings. We're running our campaign. Once we have like a purchase agreement, we already have the expertise in-house to do the design process. We've done it before for buildings that didn't pan out, and just bringing local residents together to imagine, that itself creates relationships. It creates a sense of belonging. So the design process is really valuable. And so Catherine, who's also an architect, has been leading those design processes. Because people love us, we get like the best talent from universities to donate their time. So there's someone who's been helping us, Bridget, with understanding the urban planning and the zoning constraints for every site that we look at. so that we can really understand the potential. So yeah, once we're able to land an offer and carry out the design process and the due diligence, by next fall we're ready to get the permitting and do renovations if necessary, and we're hoping that by spring or summer of next year we can be operational. And I really believe this. When we bought this building that I'm sitting in, within months we were ready to deliver, and you should have seen. It was like there was a half of it was just a giant freezer, you know. We moved the kitchen, we turned the unit upstairs into offices. We did it very quickly, and it didn't cost a lot of money. The people at the borough love us. They don't necessarily say so because they have like this urban planner like coldness, but they do make a lot of exceptions for us. So we hope that we can continue to leverage that relationship. I went into a lot of detail about certain things that maybe I shouldn't have, but I think that what I was trying to convey by doing that was that we know what we're doing, and we know what we're doing because we persist and because we're passionate. Um, and I believe that if we continue doing what we're doing, we're really going to build a different kind of model for community development here in Montreal. And who knows, maybe, throughout North America, where we see uh, a hunger for the city to come back to life and to come back to its residents. Um, so yeah, let's open it up to questions, because I think there are probably a lot of questions. Um, and by the way, if we don't get to all the questions, we're here. We're going to invite you to go on our website and just hit the pledge button. There's no pressure. It'll just allow you to stay connected. There's a QR code here. It'll take you straight there. So yeah, let's open it up, I guess.
Right. If you're off camera, you can raise your hand. If you're on camera, well, we'll figure it out. Oh, there we go. So the question is, when you pledge, what's the timeline for paying into the bond? Is it transferable?
Yes. Okay. So our bonds are going to be available for purchase at the end of the month. Right now, we're in the legal review, so our contracts are with the lawyers, and so everything is ready. We're just waiting for them to validate and come back to us with suggestions. Um, if you pledge now, you don't have to invest right away. Our bond campaign is going to run until July and August, and the bonds themselves will be available for purchase until the end of the year. But by pledging or by signing up to the investor list, you get invited to say like the next Infosession, which is going to be in French. You might get invited to an event where we talk. For example, there's a housing conference next weekend. Sorry, yeah, this weekend. Next weekend. This weekend. And so if you wanted to learn more about our housing objectives, you could come there and meet other people, our partners. You could meet us in person. So by pledging, you kind of like join this community of investors, but there's really no obligation to invest right away or ever, really. I don't know if that helps. And there was a two-part question. Oh my God, there's so many questions. Okay, I think that's it.
All right. Yeah, and I believe for people from resource movement, we like to call this part the pleasure activism part, where you get to donate and be part of something transformative. At the same time, you get to see what you're comfortable with as somebody who has limited capital to donate. So we encourage people to do that. And I'm sure at one of these events we'll have the chance to talk about these wonderful milestones that we're definitely going to cross. All right, so we have another question from Theo. Faye, did you want to read it out loud yourself, or would you like me to?
I actually would love for you to read out the questions because I'm getting overwhelmed by all this
Okay.
that. But I did want to say that there was the other part of the question, which is it transferable? Yes, community bonds are transferable. There is a process, um, but they are. In fact, you can even buy a bond for someone else. So if you're planning your succession or whatever, you can buy a bond for your children or whatever. If you want to gift a bond, you can definitely do that as well.
Well, then Christmas is not around the corner, but many other holidays are, so that's a good idea. I misread that, so I guess bonus question from my end. So for Theo, they're asking, can you tell us about your communication strategy for the first campaign? Did it take a lot of work to make sure people felt safe investing and understood what they were doing?
That's a really good question. I would say that the communication plan for the first campaign was very, very, very different from the communication plan for this campaign. In 2018, um, there was no plan. There was no organization really. It was like I said, we were just starting and it was just a vision. So I personally approached me and a few of my friends who were the co-founders of Brick by Brick, personally approached people in our personal network. We did have like a video and we made a website, and there are a few people who invested from the larger community. And then that made up a good chunk of the community bond investors. And then it was word of mouth. So concurrently, the bâtiment set had also issued community bonds. So when they heard about our bonds, their investors got interested. We also did a couple of information sessions locally, and a lot of like local residents bought our bonds either because they had been long-term residents and had become owners, and they wanted to save their neighborhood from like gentrification, or because they were recently buying or planning to buy and they felt bad and they wanted to offset their impact. Um, but in terms of like launching a national campaign, that really was not our communication strategy at all. And I think it was good, you know. Now that we have Tapestry behind us and we know that, you know, we're really the due diligence is clean and our finances, we have, you know, when you're not an organization and you don't have a track record, you don't have financial records. Now you know, we have financial statements, we have financial projections, we have assets too you know, to secure, they're not secured, but to back our claims that we can succeed. So I feel more comfortable now doing it differently. Back
Mm,
then, it really was just friends and family type of thing.
thank you. All right. So Saba, hey Saba, asks what do we expect to be the total capital outlay for your next projects? And do you expect them to be able to turn to the same institution for needs beyond equity, loan, and community bonds? All right.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Uh, our projection, like I'd mentioned earlier, is really to make sure that we're not over leveraged with the bank, because we want to make sure that we are not subject to interest rate risk. Because the biggest risk in real estate is that interest rate risk. If the interest rate shifts a lot, and a lot of your capital is like if you're over leveraged and a lot of your capital comes from the bank, then your monthly payments are going to change drastically. So we feel comfortable with a maximum of 50% engagement from the bank. So our capital stack is more or less 50-50 in terms of community bonds and the bank. That being said, you know, this is a projection. In reality, if the building that we find is turnkey, then you know, and let's say it's a turnkey building and we have our 20,000 square feet that we want, but it's actually a 40,000 square feet building, and there's just a regular tenants from like the regular the market paying tenants, then that's going to be different because we're getting market rate returns from those tenants. So we would probably come in with a little bit more from the bank. If we find that we've identified a multiplex that is in the neighborhood and that serves local residents that are in need, and we're not able to make it work because the rents are a little bit too high, then we will need to put our own cash equity in order to reduce the rents. Because what we don't want to do for a building where the rents are a little bit too high is to max out on the bank loan. So to answer your question, we don't know because it'll depend on the buildings that we acquire. Our goal is to make sure that we don't over leverage with the bank, and we're gonna invest our capital accordingly, with the goal in mind to make sure that our spaces are accessible, that they're affordable, and obviously that they're clean, that they're well maintained, and that they're in good shape. Yeah.
All right. There's a few terms in there that I don't know myself. One is turnkey. What does that mean, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah. So sorry. I'm so sorry. Turnkey just means that the renovation is there's no renovations to do. And the capital cost of renovation is very high. I mean, it's higher than just an operational mortgage. So it's like 7 or 8%. So if you have a turnkey project, then the money you have to put into it is less, so you can afford to take a little bit more from the bank. It's less risky to take money from the bank on a building that's in really good shape, but it's more risky to take more money from the bank if you have to do renovations, which are expensive. So that's the thing. Turnkey just means it doesn't require renovations.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that. All right. I see no more questions in the chat. Is there anybody in the room that has a burning or a non-burning question? So there's no pressure on anybody, but if ever anyone already made the pledge and wants to, tell us, that'd be wonderful. So Renee asks, do you only work on urban projects or have you worked on conservation easements with community bonds?
That's a really good question. It's funny, we're an organization of dreamers, and my colleague Amanda, who's here, has had this dream of having a retreat center for, and I hope I'm not outing you, Amanda, for like community workers. In fact, Marie-France Barbier, one of our advisors, also has this dream because I think anybody who's worked in community knows that it's really tough work and the burnout rate is very high. And most people who are not burnt out have this background, low level, continual burnout, which doesn't prevent them from getting stuff done, but it in a way prevents them from seeing the big picture, remembering why they're doing what they're doing, and coming up with innovative solutions. So the idea is one day, after we feel good about what we have here, we can maybe acquire something, maybe in partnership. I was talking with the people from True North Insight. I don't know if people are into meditation, but there's just a lot of good people out there that are trying to do interesting things in the countryside, and I would love to get into that one of these days. It isn't our priority right now, but I think eventually we need to think about what are the needs in the community And if there's a need to like, I guess, actualize our vision outside of the city, then of course we will consider it.
Thank you. That's so real in so many ways. Yeah. So let's see. Chris asked a very direct question about funding. If the goal is to raise $5 million, what does success look like in terms of timing? For example, what would you like by, say, May 1st? If we're wishful thinking, I guess.
Yeah, it's a good question, you know. Growth in general for an organization, really for any enterprise, is not linear. So I don't want to get stressed about, you know, how much do we want to raise, you know, this month or this week. We set a high bar because we believe that we are ready for that, but we cannot control the context. And the idea behind the 5 million was, okay, well, where were we in 2018 and what were we able to raise? And where are we now? Are we an organization that's 20 times more effective, 20 times bigger, with 20 times more, 20 times more of strong of a track record? It's hard to quantify these things, but basically we said, yes, this is where we're at. So that's kind of like what inspired that number. With that being said, we're going to work with the resources that we have, just like we did in 2018. And I think investing $1 in Brick by Brick is like creating $100 worth of community wealth. So whether we invest, whether we were able to raise $1 million or 5 million or 10 million, we're gonna make really good use of it. And there's enough of a variety of like potential sites that make it possible for us to be agile when it comes to, okay, what's the capital we're able to invest? We're lucky that we do have a really sizable equity base, so that if ever we were short, we would be able to access that, and fill the gap. So if ever we're like, okay, we have a community center here that is going to cost us, X number of dollars, and it will require $2 million in community bonds. And then we have this, multiplex that will require $500,000 down payment. But we were only able to raise 2 million. We need 2.5 million. We are able to access $500,000 worth of equity in our organization. So we're in a much better position now. And being in a much better position allows us to be more ambitious. So yeah, so I don't know if that answers the question.
It's a yes. All right. Thank you so much. I believe we have a question about let's see, do you know if it's possible to invest in community bonds through something like a RRSP, TFSA? I'm not a banking expert. I think RDSP might be, it's not something I'm familiar with.
Yeah. Yeah, you can. Absolutely, you can. So the caveat though is if you don't like paperwork, then don't do that. But if you're keen on it, it is an option. Right now we're working on the administrative part of all that. You would be required to move your RSP account, or at least to open another account with the Canadian Co-op Workers. I really should know their name, all right? But it's like a union. Uh, Hold on, Amanda is answering.
The Canadian Worker Alliance Association.
Thank you so much. You saved me. So they are partners for the RRSP, RESP, TFSA bonds. And so that's going to be available a little bit later. So if you pledge now, when it's ready, you will be informed. And then you will be able to buy your community bond and hold it in your RRSP. Obviously, there are like limits. That's everything is, I think, depends on your stuff. You have to talk to your financial advisor about that. So let's say you wanted to invest like 50,000, then you would only be able to invest like a small portion of that in your RSP, and the rest you would invest directly. Investing directly is also fun. But yes, you can do that. And we're happy to be able to do that thanks to Tapestry.
Yeah. All right. I believe this next question can be opened up to Jessica, Amber, and other folks. So how do community centers stay afloat financially? For example, do they charge fees for programming? Are they strictly nonprofit, or can they produce any profits? Do the funds grow for community centers through the bonds? I can repeat it slower if you want.
Is this question for me?
Oh, it can be for any of you, yeah.
Yeah, I guess it depends on what do we mean by community centers. The definition
Mm,
can be kind of rather flexible. Like for example, right now, our new space is Chinatown. We call it Chinatown House, and it's running. It's going to be like a phase your first project, that type of things, right? And we're going there, sweat equity, clean it up, run a bunch of programs, and so we do see it as a community center. There is a possibility for revenue generating model if we do a film screening, charge $5. So it's very small things. But if we want to do a community center with funding from the city, then we do need to get into the capital budget cycle, and that is a different type of financing system, I think. So I guess it depends on the type of center we are trying to run. Yeah, and it could be different revenue models, revenue options. But that's kind of, it's actually, we are actually in the middle of this kind of thinking about how do we make our project more self-sustaining as well. So far, we've been relying quite a bit on project-based funding for the program. And so on the capital side, the challenge is going to come.
yeah, I believe you mean when you have to put a grant in for every single project, every single program. Within a year, you already have to write 5 more grants, if not more. And
Yeah.
that's already a lot of work, yeah.
Yeah, and we are trying to go into multi-year grants, but these are, as
Mm,
all the nonprofit knows, these are difficult. Yeah, it's challenging.
yeah. Yeah, one other thing we want to do with Research Movement is break down these barriers so we can get those funds to people with a bit less paperwork.
Yes.
Faye, did you want to bounce off that one?
Yeah, sure. Maybe Amber, you can briefly say something about how our sliding scale system works. Um, just to be clear, so yeah, so the people who the anchor tenants, people who rent from us, they really love renting from us because they for the same price per square foot for their office space, they can freely access the community space. And so in a way, they're getting a deal. And at the same time, it allows us to access rents basically at market from these sort of like subsidizing tenants. That allows us to offer space for free or very, very cheap to groups that can't afford to rent space. So that's we're right now what we're trying to do is to have a community center that sort of like pays for itself.
Mhm.
as opposed to extracting, like profit from just any commercial tenant, which excludes, lower income, diverse groups,
Mhm.
people. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I will just jump in and say, I think as I said before, most of our programming is free or very accessible, very affordable pricing. And so the way we kind of have the book programming, book programs at our space or activities or events is through sliding scale. And so most of the time we do prioritize groups that are more grassroots organizations or volunteer-led or community groups. So really whatever they can donate to us, we'll accept. And maybe if there are larger organizations that have more budget for a project, for example, then we can suggest a little bit more. But usually we do prioritize these smaller groups. So I would say it's when they give a donation, it's not really a way that we finance the space, for example, but it does help us with some operational costs. But yeah, it's not really like a way that we make money because we do want to support the growth of these different organizations and support the work that they do.
Mhm.
Yeah, and to the point of like, what's the relationship between that and the bonds? Basically, it differs between the housing and the community center, because the community center is a commercial. In the commercial sector, private real estate investors or developers usually make something like 10% return in terms of like net cash flow. So that's money that our cost of capital is very low. It's, as you know, it's like as I mentioned, it's our coupon payments are 3%, 4%, and 5%, and we don't have a huge mortgage. So we're able to sort of like put that back into the community and really leverage, really focus on supporting the space users and building bridges between them. And that allows us to create new programming. And that new
Mhm.
programming, philanthropic funders, the city, um, various donors in our communities, they love that stuff. And so that that ends up being like extra income. So we're able to make it work that way.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much for that. So I believe when we talk about profit, it's really ingrained in the system that we live in. But with projects like Brique by Brique and the JIA Foundation, it's about reaffirming the community and how that is the part that actually needs to grow, right? Where it's not profit, there is exceedant money that can then be returned to community and to create these spaces where community building can happen and then community builds and then I believe the sky is the limit as to the world we can build with that, which means that your pledge, of which we seem to have at least four today, which is fantastic because the bonds are not even out yet, um, is that you're not only helping build this building, you're helping to foster community in a way that goes against everything we're seeing now that seems to be wanting to have less community, which is terrible, honestly. So very happy be here and to answer these questions. I believe we have a bit of time still, but uh, in the meantime, if anybody has a question, or else I'll leave it to Amber, Faiz, and Jessica maybe to give us a closing word.
I want to go last.
I would just say that this is very inspiring. I'm very excited about dreaming together with Brick by Brick. And it's true, sometimes with the daily operational stuff, sometimes you forget to kind of sit back and then just dream big. And so I really appreciate today's session. And as we move into our new space, we're still at that sweat equity getting the space ready stage. But so this is really inspiring, very exciting for us. And then we hope we will be able to join the movement and bring some excitement and interest into this community bond campaign.
I guess I'll go. I just want to thank everyone for joining us. It was great to see that there are so many people interested in our work. And we're really happy to be able to present to you today. This was our first kind of online session, so I'm glad hopefully it went really well. Yeah, I think if you're interested in the work that we're doing, or you're inspired by everything we talked about today, then you can follow us on our social media, on Facebook and Instagram. We do post a lot about our upcoming events. And you can also visit our website, the Invest page, where we have all the information about the campaign and all of the updates, how you can get involved and make a pledge or invest. So thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It is definitely heartwarming to see the interest in our projects. And yeah, just to reiterate, look, we started a handful of years ago with a few $100,000, and now, in a year, 31 families are going to be paying 25% of their income, and they're going to be able to stay in this neighborhood for as long as they want. Their kids are not going to have to change schools. They're going to have extra money to, take care of themselves. And we have this community center, which is booming. I would invite anyone that's local to just come by, and you'll see, like, even the building itself, there's pictures of local residents who can see themselves as they walk by. It's really something special. And if with a few $100,000 we're able to do that, just imagine what we can do with a few million. So I hope that you are gonna stay connected, and pledge or no pledge, money or no money. It's not even about that. It's really about building a community of people that really believe that a different, better world is possible, and to help each other do better. So I really, really want to hear from people. If you can't afford to invest, that's fine. We need all kinds of expertise and support. So that's one thing that I really, really want to stress. Brick by Brick recognizes all kinds of different talent, and we try to nurture that so that we can grow together and make the most of our time here on this beautiful planet. So thank you so much. And thank you, Resource Movement, for hosting this. Big up.
Yeah. An absolute pleasure to facilitate this session. I leave here with a heart full and a lot of hope for the future, which is quite needed in these times. So thank you all for bringing us together, and have a great night, everyone.